There are encounters in life that seem to have been written long before they took place. Sometimes we cross paths with someone and feel something that defies any rational explanation. A subtle shiver, a sense of having been there before, or even a profound discomfort, as if that person tripped a hidden switch inside us. What Carl Jung called synchronicity and the destiny of the soul doesn't reveal itself only in moments of peace, but especially in the signs that keep following us when something greater is trying to manifest. If you've ever had the impression that an inexplicable connection is guiding your steps, this video will illuminate the signals indicating that a predestined bond is working quietly behind the scenes. Prepare to dive into a universe where the unconscious shapes life's most remarkable encounters. Leave a comment below. I am ready to recognize the signs of destiny. Within Carl Jung's analytical psychology, significant meetings between two people are not seen as mere coincidences. Jung believed that certain connections result from deep unconscious forces that guide us toward wholeness. This process, called individuation, leads us to integrate all aspects of our psyche, including those we project onto others. When we feel someone haunting us emotionally, even from a distance, even over time, it may be that this person is activating parts of ourselves not yet integrated. We project onto them our shadow, all that we have repressed or ignored in ourselves, and also our animus or anima, the internal masculine and feminine archetypes. That's why some relationships feel so intense, confusing, or inevitable. They are not just about the other person, but about aspects of ourselves striving to emerge into awareness. Jung also spoke of synchronicity, events that recur with meaning, yet have no causal explanation. When we are destined for someone, the universe seems to conspire so that signs, meetings, and memories appear almost magically, like echoes of the collective unconscious, reminding us there is something to be lived there. These emotional hauntings are not negative, but invitations to self-knowledge. The more we resist, the more they persist, until we can clearly face what is being revealed. Destined relationships are not about perfection, but transformation. They are powerful mirrors of the soul that challenge us, heal us, and complete us, not because the other lacks something, but because they reveal what we have forgotten in ourselves. When we encounter someone who seems to touch the deepest layers of our being, the psyche naturally projects unrecognized internal content onto that person. Carl Jung teaches that projection is an essential mechanism of consciousness. What we fail to acknowledge in ourselves tends to be cast onto others. In relationships that feel predestined, this process intensifies. The other person is not merely an external being, but a mirror reflecting parts of us still to be integrated. In such connections, we may feel as if we've known the person for ages, even though we've just met. This happens because we're relating not only to them, but to everything they symbolize for our unconscious. That symbolic charge leads us to idealize them, build expectations, or even reject certain traits disproportionately. Love at first sight, instinctive rejection, or inexplicable magnetism can all be manifestations of these unconscious projections. In the early stages of a bond like this, everything often feels magical, light, enchanting. Yet as the relationship deepens, conflicts, disappointments, and misunderstandings begin to surface. Frustration arises when the projected image dissolves and reality shows its face. At that moment, if the relationship is truly destined, it reveals its real purpose, not merely pleasure or companionship, but transformation. The pain we feel when we discover the other doesn't live up to our idealized projection is actually a summons. We are called to recognize that what we saw in them, whether beauty, courage, sensitivity, power, vulnerability, or even fear, resides within us, though denied or forgotten. This process is demanding because it shatters illusions, yet it is also liberating, drawing us closer to the truth of who we are. Jung pointed out that the healing of projection is one of the most powerful paths to individuation. Instead of seeking in another what we lack, we begin to acknowledge that those qualities, good or bad, have always been within us, waiting to be embraced. In relationships that seem destined, this awakening is almost inevitable. The emotional intensity, the sense of inevitability, the longing for closeness, and the fear of loss coexist because we are facing an archetypal mirror that cannot be ignored. In many cases, it is through the disillusionment of projection that we finally meet the real person, not just the symbolic figure our unconscious created. That moment of disenchantment can be devastating, but it also marks the beginning of something deeper, the possibility of true love, not for the reflection of our idealizations, but for the other as they are, and in return, to be loved for who we really are, with flaws, fears, imperfections, and light. That is why these connections haunt us, because they summon us to wholeness. They won't leave us in peace, because they came to activate what is asleep within us. The person themselves may not be the final destination, but a bridge to our own reunion. The intensity of the bond serves not only to unite us with another, but to reconcile us with all the parts we separated within ourselves. Projection is just the beginning. When we move beyond it, something truly transformative occurs. The relationship ceases to be a stage for unconscious desires and becomes a field of presence, acceptance, and mutual evolution. In that moment, what seemed like chance reveals itself as a calling, and what appeared to be just another passion becomes an archetypal passage toward our center. In encounters that feel guided by something greater, we often face intense emotions, unexpected behaviors, and reactions we don't understand. Carl Jung's psychology offers a powerful explanation: the activation of the shadow. For Jung, the shadow is everything we have rejected, forgotten, or repressed. And ironically, it is through the most significant people, often those we feel destined to meet, that this shadow finds its way back into consciousness. These relationships that haunt us are, in truth, living mirrors of what we cannot see in ourselves. The person who enters our life with this force of destiny often triggers old wounds, repressed fears, and insecurities we believed we had overcome. This doesn't happen from the cruelty of chance, but because the bond awakens the content that must be integrated for us to grow and become more whole. A partner in this type of connection can make us feel insecure, jealous, fragile, aggressive, or even excessively vulnerable. All of this are manifestations of the shadow being projected, not as punishment, but as an invitation. The relationship becomes a field of internal confrontation, where the soul demands that we look at what has been left aside. Instead of fleeing or blaming the other for these feelings, Jung's proposed path is introspection. What is this showing me about myself? The shadow is not composed only of negative aspects. It also includes unrecognized talents, repressed strengths, and gifts never developed. Sometimes the other person awakens our creativity, our yearning for freedom, or our inner power, everything once stifled by fear or convenience. By manifesting through that person's presence, the shadow invites us to reclaim precious parts of our being. The relationship then becomes more than an emotional exchange. It becomes a psychic journey. Every conflict, every misunderstanding, every silent moment carries within it an opportunity for self-knowledge. When denied, the shadow takes revenge through self-sabotage, self-destruction, and the repetition of patterns. But when welcomed, it becomes a vital force. Jung said, "The person who does not integrate their shadow identifies with the persona," meaning they live superficially, trapped by masks. That is why destined relationships are so transformative. They compel us to abandon superficiality. The emotional intensity tears us apart so we can rebuild ourselves more authentically. In this process, the other is not responsible for our pain, but its messenger. They appear in our life as a key to a locked room within us. As we open ourselves to observe what is being revealed, jealousy, control, fear of abandonment, need for approval, pride, anger, we begin to see that none of it originated with the relationship. It was all already there, simply waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment often arrives when we meet someone with whom we feel a deep, almost mystical connection. Recognizing the shadow is an act of courage. It implies accepting that not everything in us is beautiful, just, or kind. But it is also an act of love, because by embracing what was denied, we become more human, more whole, and more capable of true love. When two people are willing to undergo this process together, the relationship transforms into a sacred space of mutual healing. It is common that after this passage, the connection deepens in surprising ways. The relationship ceases to be driven by need or control and is sustained by presence, truth, and compassion. Not because everything was magically resolved, but because the shadow was brought to light. And where there is light, there is clarity, authenticity, and a real possibility for love. What haunts us, in fact, is what longs to be seen. And in destined relationships, that call is so strong it can no longer be ignored. Within every person exists an unconscious polarity seeking expression. Carl Jung called these complementary forces Anima and animus. The anima represents the unconscious feminine aspect in a man, while the animus represents the unconscious masculine aspect in a woman. These inner figures are not mere abstract concepts, but living autonomous forces that profoundly influence our relationships, especially those that feel inevitable, intense, and predestined. When we encounter someone who symbolically embodies our animus or anima, the impact is immediate. It's not just physical attraction or emotional affinity. We feel as if we stand before something sacred, as if that person completes something we've always lacked. The heart races, time seems suspended, and a silent part of us recognizes the familiar in the unknown. This phenomenon is so powerful because the other unconsciously carries the archetype that lives within us. In men, the anima may manifest as fascination with mysterious, creative, intuitive women, figures evoking a rich, profound inner world. However, if this projection remains unconscious, the relationship can become confusing, idealized, or even chaotic. The man may expect his partner to embody all he has emotionally repressed: sensitivity, compassion, connection to the unconscious. When she fails to meet the idealized image, frustration arises, and the bond may break. In women, the animus manifests as attraction to strong, assertive, intellectually challenging figures, men who carry the energy of logos, of word, of spirit. If this projection is unconscious, the woman may feel dominated by rigid ideas, fixed expectations, or the sense that the other is the bearer of truth. As with the anima, disillusionment sets in when the projected image collides with the reality of an imperfect human being. These connections haunt us because they are not just encounters between two people. They are meetings between the conscious self and its unconscious counterpart. The intensity stems from the fact that these archetypal figures are not only out there in the beloved person, but in here, trying to manifest through the bond. It's as though each of us is living a part of the other, and this symbolic fusion provokes a sense of completeness, both sweet and dangerous. The true purpose of the encounter with animus or anima is not for the other to complete us, but to awaken in us the qualities we have yet to develop. A man projecting his anima onto a woman is, in truth, being invited to cultivate his own sensitivity, creativity, and empathy. A woman projecting her animus onto a man is being called to strengthen her capacity to think for herself, to act with clarity, and to assert her autonomy. These relationships feel destined because they trigger the individuation process. The other forces us to confront the inner images that dwell within us and to work consciously to integrate them. If we fail to do so, we remain trapped in cycles of idealization and disappointment, seeking in another something that actually needs to be developed within ourselves. When we embrace this challenge, we move closer to an inner wholeness that makes love freer and more genuine. It's important to remember that these projections are unavoidable. Everyone at some point projects their anima or animus onto someone. What distinguishes a transformative relationship from a destructive one is the willingness of both people to recognize that the other cannot and should not fulfill our internal archetypes. When this awareness takes root, projection begins to dissolve, and real love can be born, not based on fantasies but on presence and truth. These encounters pursue us because they are not mere whims of fate. They are living expressions of the soul's work. Anima and animus summon us to look within, to grow, to integrate, and finally, to love with open eyes. That is why, when we feel someone has marked us inexplicably, we might ask ourselves, what has this soul awakened in me that was asleep? There are moments when everything seems to align mysteriously. You think of someone and suddenly they appear. A book falls off the shelf and opens to a sentence that answers the question haunting you. A sequence of dreams, numbers, songs, or words repeats over days, pointing toward a person or an important decision. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, events connected not by causality, but by meaning. Synchronicity acts as a symbolic language of the soul, a bridge between the inner world and external events. When you are destined to meet someone, it's not uncommon for the universe to begin whispering through these significant coincidences. The encounter is not merely physical, but also psychic, and its preparation occurs in invisible layers long before the concrete moment arises. For Jung, these signs are not mere illusions or fanciful constructions of desire. They represent the activity of the collective unconscious, a matrix of images, symbols, and archetypes spanning all humanity. When two people are connected by a deep archetypal bond, their paths are magnetized by forces that transcend linear logic. Synchronicity becomes the visible trace of something being woven in the depths of the self. These signs often intensify when we go through crises, transitions, or profound inner quests. It is in this fertile ground that the unconscious finds space to manifest and reorganize our trajectory. The arrival of someone significant in our lives may come with recurring dreams, déjà vu sensations, accidental meetings that repeat, sudden changes in direction. None of this is by chance. Everything is part of a larger movement where the outer world reflects the inner one. Meeting a person who seems destined for us is often surrounded by a special energetic field. There is a sense of inevitability, as if, no matter what happens, you two were bound to meet. Paths cross in unlikely ways, yet with almost surgical precision. The lingering impression is that something ancient has been reactivated, a memory not of this life, but of an atemporal dimension of the soul. Many people try to rationalize these events, seeking scientific, statistical, or logical explanations. Yet synchronicity does not belong to the domain of reason. It belongs to the realm of symbol, of deep connection between inner meaning and outer manifestation. When we ignore these signs, we often feel a persistent unease, as if something important is being lost or overlooked. And when we welcome them, we open the door to a journey of transformation. It is crucial, however, to discern between desire and synchronicity. Not every coincidence is a sign, and not every intense connection is destined. The key lies in inner listening. Jung said the soul speaks through images and signs, and the attentive individual learns to decipher this language. When the signs repeat with deep emotional content, calling for change and self-discovery, they likely originate from a source deeper than mere conscious desire. Synchronicity shows us that the universe is not indifferent to the soul's journey. When two people are destined to meet, circumstances organize with a mysterious intelligence. But that meeting is not an end in itself. It is the beginning of a path. True synchronicity serves not only to unite, but to awaken. It pushes us inward, demanding that we listen, feel, and transform. In relationships marked by this phenomenon, there is a sense of a shared mission. Something greater is at play, not just romantic love, but the activation of a profound psychic process in which each becomes a catalyst for the other's evolution. The signs of destiny do not haunt us to punish or test us, but to remind us that an invisible thread links our stories, dreams, and wounds to something much larger. Recognizing and honoring synchronicity means accepting that true love is not built solely on rational choice. It also arises from mystery, from inner listening, and from openness to what life wants to reveal. Some connections don't ask permission to happen. They arrive intense, challenging, and transformative. According to Carl Jung's psychology, these relationships are not mere accidents of fate, but deep manifestations of the unconscious, which uses projection, shadow, anima, animus, and synchronicity as instruments of awakening. When a person haunts us, it is not only they who are present, but our soul trying to speak to us through that presence. These encounters serve as portals to individuation. Instead of seeking salvation or completion in another, we learn that the true journey is within. The other reveals, provokes, mirrors, and sometimes heals us, but only when we are willing to look inward and heed the signs. If you feel someone has left an inexplicable mark on your life, perhaps they came to fulfill a sacred role on your path. Pay attention. The signs are everywhere. If this content touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And now, watch the video appearing on the screen. It may be the continuation of the answer your soul is seeking. Your transformation begins the moment you decide to see beyond.